staff and Taoiseach, I'd first like to address the embarrassing mistake in my shirt. In my defense, I am from Hungary, and also I confused Fine Gael with Fianna Fáil, but who can blame me for that? They're virtually indistinguishable at this stage. So, student debate is very important because it allows us to challenge those in power and the prevailing ideas of the ruling elite. Apologies, Taoiseach. The Taoiseach is here tonight. If he were here for any other occasion, his hands would be shaken, photographs would be taken, words of admiration expressed towards him. His picture would go on the university website. The leader of the country is visiting our prestigious institution. In other settings too, he visits a school, he visits a hospital or a community center. It would not be respectable to challenge him for the undeniable harm that he, his party, and this coalition government has done to our communities. Yet, when he comes to the Hist, he is expected to give a speech and is available to be publicly challenged. The playing field is, in fact, leveled. It would be a dereliction of duty for us debaters not to challenge the narrative that the government is putting forward. It would be a dereliction of duty for me, as the president of the Students' Union, not to challenge the narrative that the government is putting forward as well. Specifically, and especially because when the Taoiseach comes down here, he reminisces about his old days at the Hist. He talks a bit about this right-wing conspiracy theory that free speech is being suppressed in our universities. This is an attempt to distract from the elephant in the room, this government's track record. Through facts and logic, we can expose the Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and Greens coalition for what they are. A government of the rich, of the voucher funds and of the corporate donors and the capitalists. And this government does deserve to be called out at every occasion. And it is very important, this idea of using facts and logic in debate to state one's case. It is especially important because this government dazzles us with statistics all the time. They tell us the minimum wage has been increased. They tell us the economy is booming because the GDP is up. They tell us employment levels are at their records. And when this happens in the press or in the radio or in official government communication, we seldom have the right of directly replying. We seldom have the right to challenging the government. In fact, sometimes at certain events, we have to disrupt, like when we did with Minister Eamon Ryan, where students were given no unfiltered ability to challenge what he was saying. And you know, Minister Eamon Ryan was there talking about how much he does for the environment. And there was no ability to maybe pose a critique because the questions were filtered. This is not the case here at a debate. We don't have to disrupt. I can just state the facts plainly. Despite the impression that this government is trying to give you, homelessness levels are at an all-time high. Over 1 million people are on the HSC waiting lists. 1 in 5 in Ireland are on chronically low pay. 1 in 6 are on or below the poverty line. This government is not acting, and this government is not acting because they're so beholden to voucher funds, to multinational corporations and big capital that they don't want to act. And no amount of lobbying can change this. They know very well the issues, but they are not going to act against their interests, interests which have become inextricably linked up with corporate interest. The Taoiseach, as well as all the government parties, are limited by their neoliberal and austerity-driven agenda that became the norm after the 2008 financial crash. This indictment that the government prefers profit over people can be seen very well in the fact that 1 in 25 homes are empty in Ireland, 12,000 in Dublin alone. And 80 TDs and senators are landlords in the Dáil and the Seanad, and most of these, I would say, are government TDs and government senators. And landlords do like the option of treating housing as a commodity, not a public good, because the truth is that an empty house can make more profit in certain cases than a home full of life. And nothing makes it so clear that the government is okay with this situation than the fact that they voted to end the eviction ban in March 2023, which we at the time rightly called out as the government having blood on their hands by pushing out children, women, men, and families onto the streets. It all goes back to this government having broken the social contract and abandoned their duty of care to Ireland. There is no better example of this than the events currently ongoing in the healthcare and social care sector. While all of this pressure is on Irish society, with homelessness, with failing healthcare policies, with failing education policies, failing drug policies, who is it that absorbs the shock? It is no other than our frontline staff who are working overtime, who are struggling. The frontline staff, specifically Section 39, Section 56, Section 10 public workers, who are health services, homeless services, and children's services workers, they had to threaten to strike in order to get their basic dignity. The basic dignity of having pay equality and of being paid a fair wage. This government disrespects the lives of the less fortunate, so much so, and that's including the 13,000 homeless people in Ireland, so much so that the people who are supposed to care and work for the less fortunate have to strike in order to get what they want, in order to be able to continue performing their duties. At the same time, the government is happy to give landlords billions in subsidies through the housing assistance payment scheme, but refuses to properly treat workers who are caring for the most vulnerable in this country. Not only have they failed us in their domestic policy, but in foreign policy too. And I have to say, I do respect that the Irish government has a marginally better stance on Palestine than the rest of the European Union. But the bar is low. The standard is very low. The Irish people unequivocally support Palestine in opinion polls. Yet, only one party, and Taoiseach, this is your party, there's only one party that blocked the Occupied Territories Bill, which would have a direct economic impact on the apartheid state of Israel. Also, you yourself, Taoiseach, have said that Israel is the closest thing to a democracy in the Middle East. Yet, that ignores the fact that an apartheid state cannot be a democracy. It is furthermore disappointing and shameful to see the government's and the Taoiseach's comments yesterday on the criteria for accepting Palestinian refugees and how, because they're not from the EU, they will be treated differently to Ukrainian refugees. This is just racism. And the other things that I mentioned are simply this government trying to get in bed with the Western imperialist NATO powers and the rich corporate donors, abandon Irish neutrality, align themselves with America and the rest of the Western world. Ireland is a post-colonial state, and this government would do well to remember this and our duty to stand in solidarity with oppressed groups around the world. Now, let me conclude. Since the Taoiseach has come to a university, let me tell you, Taoiseach, how this university is. Our buildings are collapsing, our staff, 50%, are on precarious contracts. Postgraduate researchers have no workers' rights. Students are paying extortionate fees and rents. We see students sleeping in cars, couch surfing at friends' places, dropping out of academia altogether, abandoning their lifelong dreams and passions. And we see the exact same happen to staff. Actually, 50% of those, not just in Trinity, 50% of staff are on precarious contracts across the whole of Ireland. Across Ireland, 15,000 students are in rent or fee debt to their institutions. 88% worry about their finances. 1 in 3 have considered dropping out. And the core grant is still too low. The government identified a funding gap of 307 million. It has given 60 million in budget 2024. This is meager. It will lead to further precarity. It will lead to further student services like mental health supports and health supports being cut. And the academic sector will continue to struggle. As well as the temporary fee reductions that were given in budget 2024 are just that. They're temporary. It's an election budget aimed at dazzling students and getting votes. And it will still mean The result of this budget still means that education will continue to remain a luxury for the few and not a public good for all. The rest of Budget 2024 heads down the same path. It gives tax breaks to businesses, tax breaks to landlords, and an increased military spending of 54 million euros at a time when homelessness is so high, at a time when the healthcare system is struggling, at a time when the education sector needs our investment. If you consider me disrespectful or not respectable, just consider this. The policies of this government amount to what is called social murder. Social murder is when people are exposed to conditions because of state policies that damage their health, such as our failing healthcare system, such as being pushed into homelessness, such as climate pollution. And so, as a result of this, people die prematurely. This is called social murder. And this concept is very important because the government will tell you that the market cannot be controlled, that it is all up to the market what happens in this country. The invisible hand of the market acts in one way or another, and we cannot do anything about it. However, the concept of social murder puts the square blamely on the political elite because, yes, these are policy choices. The government is following a neoliberal economic policy that is trusting everything to the market. And yes, this leads to the suffering of so many people. We should, as a result, and we should in response embarrass them at every opportunity, call them out at every opportunity and hold them accountable for their actions. And that is what I am doing, and that is what we are doing. Don't forget to register to vote and keep organizing in grassroots groups, student unions, trade unions, to challenge this government, vote them out, remove every single one from power, and challenge this system. Thank you very much.